Tonight, we're in Washington, where 1 year until Election Day, the inquiry hangs over everything.
Deranged, hyper-partisan impeachment witch hunt.
Donald Trump defiant. A secret testimony goes public. For the Democrats, there is no room for error.
Before, we just had to assume how bad it was going to be, and now we're living it.
What you should be watching for as the campaign heats up.
Also tonight, Elizabeth May steps aside.
I am no longer leader of the Green Party of Canada.
After 13 years, where do the Greens go from here? Why some drinking water in Canada is as bad as in Flint, Michigan. And a dangerous stunt on a busy Toronto highway, why even the spectators could be charged. This is The National. After Canadians elected a minority government, and already we are seeing a big leadership change. Today, Elizabeth May announced she's stepping down as Green Party leader, saying it's time for the Greens to grow in a new direction.
Too many politicians go out at the moment that everybody wants to kick them out the door. That's not happening here, and I like picking a moment when things are going well because I believe in this party.
It is a role she's held since 2006, leading the party through 4 federal elections. May will continue as an MP, but Rosie, she says she's ready for a change, and so is her party.
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. And the announcement, not really a surprise, because May had signaled in recent weeks that her decision to step down as leader was coming. But there have been some calls, too, within the party for a leadership race as soon as possible. Some Greens are rather disappointed with the campaign, unhappy that they weren't able to capture the balance of power in this minority parliament. So what will a new leader mean for the Green Party? Salima Shivji looks into that.
An election result that Elizabeth May calls both a big success and the impetus for her to leave as leader on her terms.
I want to choose my own time of going. I want to choose a time when we've done better than we've ever done before, with over 1 million votes.
It's also a promise kept to her daughter, Kate.
Mom, you can work like harder than anybody's ever seen, but it's not good for you.
May isn't going far, staying on as MP and her party's leader in the House.
Hi, Elizabeth May.
But her 13 years as head of the party, complete with victories like claiming a first seat, are now behind her. So is a federal campaign that, after provincial success, was seen as a great opportunity. The hope of capturing a dozen seats shattered. The party only managed 3 and failed to capitalize on a moment where May's central goal was also top of mind for voters.
What you saw was a lot of bunching of progressive parties on the left talking about green issues, talking about climate action, but people did not see Elizabeth May as the path to actually achieving that climate action.
There was praise today from political opponents, including one former Liberal May tried unsuccessfully to woo to the Greens. Jody Wilson-Raybould applauding her friend for passion, determination, and thoughtful advocacy. Praise also from fellow Greens when asked about the path forward for a new leader.
Tenacity, bravery, the same qualities that I would use to describe Miss May.
I really deeply admire her legacy. I mean, she's been a good friend of mine, a mentor, an inspiration.
But also criticism from some with leadership ambitions.
I think a lot of people are looking for somebody a little bit younger, but that also has experience and is completely bilingual.
And so begins a year-long search to fill a large void. Elizabeth May says she'll stay neutral. It's for Green Party members to choose their new champion next fall. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, Elizabeth May is just the first significant change in this new minority rule, but she may not be the last.
No matter where public life has taken me or will take me.
On Wednesday, the Conservatives will hold their first caucus meeting since the election, and Andrew Scheer will have to answer some tough questions about his leadership and what he will do to address his team's concerns. He needs to calm those waters by the spring when the party holds an automatic leadership review.
I need to earn your vote.
Liberal MPs will start their new minority reality this week, too, when they say goodbye to some colleagues who lost. And of course, the Prime Minister is still working on his cabinet, which will inevitably have new faces. Next week, he'll meet with the opposition leaders to talk about the path forward for this minority government, a path that could see more dramatic changes in the months ahead. Andrew.
Well, in cities across this country, new concern about just what is in Canadians' tap water. A year-long investigation by more than 100 journalists, including some from Concordia University, has revealed unsafe levels of lead in a third of waters tested. And in some, the levels were even higher than those recorded in Flint, Michigan. Here's Bonnie Allen now with how 2 cities are responding.
In Regina's heritage neighborhood, homes from the early 1900s often have lead-contaminated drinking water. Shayna Stock doesn't have lead plumbing, so the culprit is clear: the city's lead pipe that delivers water to her house.
I've been in this house for 10 years now, and the letter we got last year was the first I had ever heard about there potentially being lead in the water, so it was a bit surprising to get that letter.
The city of Regina offers free lead testing, but it's voluntary.
They take 11 samples.
Stock's lead levels were 3 times higher than what's considered safe. Not unusual, it turns out. The tainted water investigation collected 12,000 test results from drinking water in 11 cities. A third exceeded safe lead levels. Bruce Lamphere is a lead toxicity expert who consulted on the project.
For too long, we've sort of just looked the other way. We haven't required municipalities to test for lead contamination in the water, and so it's been overlooked.
This is the filter.
The city of Regina gives homeowners free water filters, a cheap alternative to the real solution, removing all those lead service lines. It only rips out about 100 a year.
At that pace, it would be 20 to 25 years, but we are looking to accelerate that.
In comparison, the city of Montreal has pledged to remove 48,000 lead service lines over the next 11 years. The city is going to test 100,000 buildings for lead levels. It will also force homeowners to replace lead pipes on their private property.
It's about public health.
Regina has no plans to go that far. Shayna Stock has no idea when the city will rip out the lead pipe that delivers this water.
It's concerning.
Stock wants more testing and more transparency from the city. Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Regina.
And a different public health concern to tell you about in Toronto tonight. Officials are warning of a dangerously high number of unvaccinated students in some schools. Now, CBC News has analyzed the data and found some of the lowest immunization rates are at a dozen alternative schools. And the risk of spreading very contagious diseases there, very real. Farah Morali explains.
This is Toronto's Alpha Junior School. It's one of the city's alternative schools, where non-traditional teaching methods are practiced. According to public health data, more than 22% of students here are unvaccinated. It's the second highest rate in the city.
As a parent, does that concern you? I mean, not really. I understand why people choose not to vaccinate their children. There's lots of issues of people concerned about some of the science, some of the effects of certain vaccinations.
A CBC News analysis looked at vaccination rates at Toronto public schools and found 10% or more of students at 12 schools received an exemption because of their parents' beliefs. All 12 were alternative schools.
If we had an exemption rate of, say, 10% across all schools in Toronto, we could definitely see outbreaks of measles.
Federal, provincial, and municipal health authorities all agree. Vaccines are critical in preventing the spread of infectious diseases like measles. Ontario, BC, and New Brunswick are the only provinces that mandate certain vaccines for school-aged children. But in all 3, parents can still get an exemption based on their personal or religious beliefs. Part of the problem, according to health officials, misinformation on the dangers of vaccines that still persist.
That they do cause injury. Our government pretends that they don't.
A lot of it is false truths, and they've understood it and take it to heart, and they've chosen not to vaccinate their children.
Good job!
Rebecca Stonham is hoping to reach those parents. Her daughter nearly died after contracting whooping cough at 7 weeks, just days before she was scheduled to be vaccinated.
I think that for people that are just electing to not vaccinate their children for their own personal beliefs, I don't think that justifies enough of a reason to put other children at risk. You want to play with your tractor?
Toronto's chief medical health officer wants the province to only allow exemptions for medical reasons. Ontario's Minister of Health says it has no plans to change the current approach to vaccines. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
South of the border, the political focus right now is split. For starters, they're eyeing a big moment now just a year away, the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Donald Trump, of course, fighting to keep his job, the Democrats fighting to get him out. And not just through the election either, because the positioning, the campaigning, it's all happening as the push to impeach the president starts going public. And at the center of both of those stories, Adrian, Washington.
Which is why we're here again tonight at the start of what really promises to be a totally interesting year here. So this is Freedom Plaza. This is in the heart of Washington. Behind me is the Capitol building. If you walk 10 minutes in the other direction, you're at the White House. And inside both of these important structures these days, real intensity, because this is a critical time for this country. Before the Democrats can really make their case for the presidency, they need a candidate. So tonight we go inside the race to win the nomination and ask, how will the impeachment inquiry affect the campaign, if at all? But first, this was a pretty big day in the Trump impeachment inquiry as some testimony goes public and other witnesses stay silent. Paul Hunter takes us through it.
Ask Donald Trump about Marie Yovanovitch, and as he put it today,
the president of Ukraine was not a fan of hers either. I mean, he did not exactly say glowing things. I'm sure she's a very fine woman. I just don't know much about her.
Yovanovitch was the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine until April, when Trump effectively fired her. Last month, she testified behind closed doors in the impeachment inquiry against him, with her private testimony released today as the inquiry moves into its new public phase.
You will see in Ambassador Yovanovitch's testimony what a dedicated public servant she is.
In transcripts, Yovanovitch says Ukrainian officials had warned her of a smear campaign against her, with Trump insiders, including Rudy Giuliani, looking to hurt her, and that she needed to watch her back. This as more White House officials subpoenaed to testify today were no-shows as part of White House efforts to derail the inquiry. Among the no-shows, lawyer John Eisenberg.
And I think we can infer that the reason they don't want the public to hear from Mr. Eisenberg is that it would tend to corroborate allegations against the president.
It's Eisenberg who's said to have moved a summary of Trump's infamous phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky into a top-secret White House server, normally meant only for matters of national security. That's the call in which Trump seemed to try to pressure Zelensky into finding dirt on Trump rival Joe Biden. So there's the still unanswered question.
Why would a call record that the president would have the country believe was perfect, why would it be hidden in this classified system?
So, Paul, this inquiry is clearly captivating Washington, but most voters don't live here. So do you have a sense of how it's playing out there?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, part of the point of the inquiry is to get Americans on side with impeachment, to put evidence out there, see if there's support for it. And right now, there seems to be. I think the latest poll that I saw had it at just a smidge over 50%. In favor of impeachment. That said, I was at a Trump rally in Tupelo, Mississippi Friday night, and I put that to Trump backers. And every single one of them said that they think the impeachment process is ridiculous, that if Trump is impeached, there would be, fury. I said to one guy, what if he's impeached? And he said, if he's impeached, we will turn around and we will vote him right back into office. It's a reminder, Adrian, that this country is still deeply divided.
All right, Paul, thanks very much. Much more from Washington still ahead. Susan takes us inside a crucial stop on the path to winning the Democratic nomination. And I sit down with a panel of political insiders to talk about an election year like no other. That's starting in about 10 minutes. Back to you in Toronto, Andrew.
Is the U.S. still a safe country for asylum seekers? That question is being asked in a Canadian court this week. Right now, asylum seekers crossing from the U.S. at a regular border crossing are sent back to make their asylum claim in the United States. But this court challenge could change that. The CBC's Habiba Noshin explains.
She's known as claimant ABC and is at the center of a legal challenge heard in federal court today. She spoke to CBC's The Fifth Estate in 2017.
Podíamos regresar a la casa porque si no nos iban a matar
The woman is from El Salvador and says she fears if she and her daughters are sent back, they will be killed by gang members.
He escuchado de mucha gente que Canadá es un país mucho más humano, donde están más dispuestos a ayudar a la gente que tiene problemas en su país.
But because of the 2004 Safe Third Country Agreement, Canadian asylum is out of reach. Since she landed in the U.S. first, that's where she has to make her claim. With Amnesty International and 2 other advocacy groups, she launched a legal challenge to the agreement in 2017 that's being heard in federal court this week. Outside, supporters calling for the agreement to be struck down. The main argument in the case, the U.S. is no longer safe for asylum seekers, especially under policies ushered in by the Trump administration.
Often denied basic health care, denied basic nutrition, and often with their lives at risk. Children are separated from their parents.
It's a moment of reckoning to decide whether we're prepared to stand with asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants, or are we going to continue to stand with and give a nod of complicity to Donald Trump?
The Canadian government has been fighting to keep the agreement in place. In court submissions, it argued that the U.S. has a highly developed asylum system in place. Habiba Nashin, CBC News, Toronto.
And we are back in 2 minutes with some unreal images from India's capital, a city literally choking on smog. Politicians are forcing millions of cars off the street as Delhi records its worst air quality in 3 years. Plus, imagine being stopped on a busy highway because of this. Ontario police are hunting for the people behind a pretty dangerous stunt.
Plus, the story behind a scary moment in Ottawa today. A crane operator suffers a medical emergency while lifting a load high above a construction site. We're back in 2 minutes.
Welcome back. The air quality in one of the world's most polluted cities has become so poor, officials say, that just breathing is like smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. Toxicity levels in New Delhi are more than 10 times above what's considered safe. And as you'll hear from the CBC's Chris Brown, it is a growing health emergency, and many say the response from the Indian government has been woefully inadequate.
An enormous, putrid white cloud has enveloped New Delhi, causing people to wheeze and choke on air that could cause permanent lung damage.
Like it's suffocating to breathe also sometimes, and inflammation in the nostrils and all, and then eyes also. Like it kind of burns.
Delhi's awful air is notorious, but this November appears to be the worst ever, mostly because of farmers in the north burning their fields after the harvest. That smoke creates a toxic stew of gases, which gets blown not just over the capital, New Delhi, but also to India's most visited tourist attraction, the Taj Mahal in nearby Agra. Today, crews resorted to spraying the pollution off trees near the World Heritage Site, and there was even an air purification truck driving around to suck pollutants out of the smog, though both measures smacked of desperation. The city's top engineer said the truck was being dispatched to the worst spots, and he insisted it was making a difference. As a further measure, private cars are being restricted, with even and odd-numbered license plates being permitted on alternating days. But local climate policy experts cast doubt on the effectiveness of that tactic too.
Of course, it's ineffective in dealing with air pollution as an issue. If air pollution was solely due to the vehicular traffic, then this would be a solution. Right now, it cannot be a solution because motorized private transport has a very small share in the whole pie.
Using farm machinery instead of burning to get rid of the crop leftovers is widely accepted as essential to solving Delhi's wintertime smog problem. The government is subsidizing some farmers to buy the new equipment, but its benefits may take years to be felt. And even then, it won't do anything about industrial pollution, which is also a huge contributor to India's dirty air. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Wow. Okay, let's go to Ian now in our Vancouver National Newsroom. He's watching developing stories for us.
And let's begin in Ottawa tonight, where firefighters and paramedics climbed up a construction crane to rescue a worker. That worker had a medical emergency this afternoon high up on the crane in the city's downtown. Ottawa police say a cable broke and that caused the crane to drop its load, but no one was injured. Firefighters used ropes and pulleys to lower the worker to the ground. He was taken to hospital in stable condition. In Quebec, hydro officials say they're in the final push to bring the last of their clients back online after Friday's massive windstorm. Hydro-Quebec says more than 25,000 customers still without power, and 1,500 workers will try to have them all reconnected by tomorrow night. At the height of the storm, almost 1 million homes and businesses were in the dark, a situation the Premier described as the worst crisis since the 1998 ice storm. And Canada's highest court has officially welcomed a new justice to the bench. A former Quebec Appeals Court judge, Nicolas Cassirer, signed the oath of allegiance this morning. The 59-year-old confirmed to his post with the Supreme Court of Canada in August. He spent 20 years as a law professor at Montreal's McGill University, including a stint as Dean of Law. A member of the World Series champions is getting a lot of attention and creating some controversy today for the baseball cap he chose to wear. That's one of the international stories we'll have for you in 20 minutes.
And still ahead on the National, a shockingly dangerous bit of stunt driving on a busy Toronto highway, stopping traffic in a coordinated move, but it's not as uncommon as you might think. That's coming up.
Plus, more in-depth coverage from Washington as the United States faces a year of big decisions. 13 Democratic candidates jockey for the nomination. Susan Ormiston takes us inside a critical Iowa campaign stop. That's next. And that is the scene in Lexington, Kentucky tonight. Donald Trump rallying his base with just 1 year to go now before the 2020 U.S. presidential election. And that is why we're here tonight in Washington to mark that milestone. Next year will be packed for both parties and key on the agenda for the Democrats to pick a nominee. As Susan Ormiston shows us, it is a crowded field filled with passionate supporters.
And so it starts, the frenzy. 1 year till America votes, with Democrats still searching for a savior. Iowa's key. If convention holds, the one who wins the Iowa caucus in February could emerge as the Democratic nominee. That's why they're all here. There's Kamala Harris, brave smiles, while her campaign is teetering. And here's Pete Buttigieg, surprisingly surging in Iowa.
Democrats face an agonizing choice in 2020. Who can win? Who can muster enough energy and enthusiasm to get out the vote and beat Donald Trump? But also, after 3 years of Trump, who do they want? Moderate or progressive, young or old? Each bears its risk.
Pete is the easy part, but his surname is so often mangled there are T-shirts to help. He trails the top three, but could be the Iowa surprise.
This thing started with about 4 people in a room in South Bend in January.
He's 37, served in the military, he's gay, married, and positioning himself as a moderate Democrat for the next era, not the last one.
You can't be patriotic about a country if you hate half of the people in it.
It's this part of the country that he's got to win. And being here, being in the middle of the country, I think it's to his advantage.
I'll be heartbroken if Pete isn't the candidate, but I'll be beyond heartbroken if the Democrat doesn't win. More so than last time.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Because now we feel what it's like to have Trump. Before we just had to assume how bad it was going to be. Now we're living it.
Democrats want a winner, and that's where Joe Biden fits in. The race from here is a scrabble. Long, tough, chaotic. Biden's painting a picture of vigor and fight, but struggling just to stay on top, pressed hard by Senator Elizabeth Warren. We caught up with Warren's campaign in Virginia.
Let me give you one more idea for making structural change. It's time for a wealth tax.
She is pitching a bold plan, tax the richest in America to pay for things like free university tuition and universal health care, but drawing critics who say her plan is unaffordable.
Senator Warren, I'm from Canada. We have some experience with Medicare in our country. Your critics say that you are not telling the truth about what it will cost, the high cost, and that taxing the top 1% won't pay for it. What do you say?
I say that I have made my principles on this clear, and that is wealthy people and big corporations are going to see their costs go up, and that hardworking middle-class families are going to see their costs go down.
Do you think she's too liberal for America?
When did liberal become a dirty word? Liberated, freedom, those are good things. I think her ideas are big, and I think they're good ideas. We need a president who's going to take us back to the America we used to be.
Thank you. There you go.
She has an impressive ground game and passionate, loyal support.
I love Warren. She's a normal working class person. She understands us, the reality of us.
But by planting herself firmly on the left, will she frighten away nervous Democrats? Back in Des Moines Friday, and they're rocking it. 100 days till the Iowa caucus chooses, and 13 candidates with their cheering squads are here at a fundraiser. Bernie Sanders, despite his heart attack, still ranks near the top.
Tonight, all of us, no matter what candidate we are supporting, are in agreement that we must defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country.
Watching it all play out is Mark McKinnon, Republican advisor and TV host of The Circus.
A lot of the physics in the Democratic primary have been pulling leftward, which has a lot of Republicans and the president excited about who that nominee could be. They're excited about going against somebody like Warren or Bernie, who's up right now.
That's Joe Biden's best opportunity. Not scary socialist, not from a new era, but safe.
And we must beat him. And I will beat him like a drum.
Most Democrats haven't made their choice, but they know what they want most: a victor. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Des Moines, Iowa.
We have more in-depth coverage from Washington next. I'm joined by some of the city's best political journalists for a look inside covering a campaign that is bound to have a few twists and turns over the next year. We're back in 2. One thing is for sure, the 2020 U.S. presidential election will be anything but boring. The relationship between the Democrats and the Republicans is hostile, due in big part to the impeachment inquiry. So how will so much anger and so much partisanship affect the outcome in just 1 year from now? David Frum is a senior editor at The Atlantic. Aaron Blake is a senior political reporter at The Washington Post. And Megan McArdle is a columnist at The Washington Post. Thank you for joining us. So we are in the book room of this old Washington hotel, all sorts of stories of the way the world used to be. Perfect place to talk about what on earth is going on now. So I suppose 1 year out from today, unless something squirrely happens, another hanging Chad situation, Americans will know who their next president is. So David, Donald Trump, second term?
Balance of probabilities is no. It's not just that his poll numbers are bad, but that when you look at the people who are against him, they are implacably against him. Most presidents have a soft opposition and a hard opposition. Donald Trump has only hard opposition. It's almost half the country says they will never consider it. But here's the condition. It is possible to imagine that he could a second time win the Electoral College while losing the popular vote. And this time, very possibly by losing the popular vote by even more. 2.7 million down last time. It could be as much as 4 million down the next time.
But isn't it the case that with a few sort of recent examples, most incumbent presidents win? The economy is pretty good. Why wouldn't he win?
He's exceptional at alienating people, right? But I think that there is a caveat to what David is saying, which is this. The people he alienates most are affluent suburban voters, right? That is why his party did so badly in the 2018 midterms. He lost people even more than he had. He started losing those people in 2016, but he really just hemorrhaged them in 2018.
So, I mean, he could become the first president to run again with an impeachment on his resume from the House. Is anybody else actually talking about this? I know it consumes this city, but outside of Washington, on the campaign trail, is this being discussed?
It's something that is coming up very seldom on the campaign trail. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of Democrats were slow to embrace it. I mean, even when this was something that much of the base was on board with, we didn't really see rank and file House Democrats on board with this. And a main reason that they said that they weren't on board is because they weren't hearing from their constituents about it. And even in the weeks after the impeachment inquiry was announced, and a lot of these lawmakers were still in their home districts, they still weren't hearing about this very much. So I think it's something kind of like our presidential elections, where people kind of tune in when it starts to get really serious and gets towards the end, and we're just not really close to that end point at right now.
Megan, you've written about how this is a president who has obviously made it clear that the norms of past political realities don't apply to him at all. So is there a chance this actually really helps him, that this is a great gift to him?
I think that's unlikely. I think things like the Brett Kavanaugh nomination, a Supreme Court nominee who was accused by someone of having tried to sexually assault her when they were in high school, that really helped him with his base, where he totally defied the norms. Any other president would have withdrawn that nomination, and Trump said nope, pushing through, and he ultimately got him through, and that really energized his base. Impeachment is, I think, a little different. It will fire up people who are super angry, who are going to be super angry that Democrats are doing this and view it as just a politicized, a witch hunt, and so forth. You hear that already from Republicans. But those people were already pretty fired up, right? Those people, I think, were going to turn out in 2020 regardless. The question is for the middle, right? Those people who maybe really don't like Democrats, but maybe also really don't like what they're being asked to defend in Trump. I don't think that the endless recitation of the things that he's done, which at very best are skeevy, I don't think that's going to help him with those voters and make them want to come out.
It has two other effects that I really hurt him. The first is Bill Clinton left a playbook behind of how to deal with an impeachment. You focus on the job, you don't get distracted, you make sure that you have a team that deals with the impeachment while the president does the job of being president. Donald Trump has thrown out that playbook. The impeachment is inside his head. He is the one who is being controlled by it, and you can see him reacting ever more impulsively. He tweeted on Sunday something like 28 times, and many of them like retweets of some pretty weird people. The New York Times did a big survey of how he retreats Russian and white supremacist accounts. He's losing control of himself.
I think there's one argument real briefly for this potentially helping the president, and that's because we all talk all the time about how President Trump's base is very much on board with him. They're very passionate, and that's true, I think, for probably 50 to 60, maybe even 65% of his supporters. But if you look at polls, there is some softness in his numbers. There was a poll last week that showed 33% of Republicans are not proud of President Trump, 41% say they're not excited about him. If those people, as they did during the Kavanaugh hearings, move from being somewhat meh on the president to be really feeling like he has been persecuted through this process, that this hasn't been entirely fair to him, I think that could mobilize his base in maybe a way that they wouldn't otherwise be.
But I think we may have a recession by next year, right? Like, absolutely could happen, and that's the end of Trump. If that happens, then he is not going to be reelected.
Let me ask you about this next year ahead, because as a Canadian, we just finished an election, 40 days, by the way. Climate change, the response to the climate crisis, the economy were big issues. Are we going to hear discussions of issues down here, or is it just going to be a year of what people think about Donald Trump?
On the Democratic debate stage, or when we get to the general election? Because the Democrats are debating real issues, right? They're talking about single-payer health care, they're talking about climate change, they're talking about immigration. They're not, I think, being as forthright and serious about their plans as one would hope. But these are real major issues on the table, and they have and people are putting forth bold, potentially too bold for suburban voters, agendas. When it gets to the general, it's going to entirely be about Trump. And I think the danger is that is the playbook that Hillary Clinton ran in 2016, right? It was all like, look at him, he's terrible. And I personally agree with that. It was not enough to get her elected. So I think that, the danger for Democrats is that their base is quite left-wing and has pushed them onto this very bold agenda of we're going to do single-payer health care, we're going to, depending on who the nominee is.
Erin, is it normal 1 year out to have a sense of who the front runner is likely to be?
We usually have at least a suspicion about it. I think at this point in 2016, even though nobody actually expected Donald Trump to be president, he had asserted a lead in some of the polls and was starting to show that he could actually be the nominee. That's not always the case, but I think the Democratic primary right now is unusually wide open at this point. Even if you look at the early states, there are some obvious winners in the early states that show that this, we could have 3-4 different winners in the first 4 states if things shake out a certain way. So this could be an ongoing process, and a lot could change before then. I do think we're starting to see the top tier of the Democrats start to solidify a little bit.
And that looks like what?
And that's Elizabeth Warren, that's Joe Biden, that's Bernie Sanders, who's kind of holding on to it a little bit. And then Pete Buttigieg is kind of the wild card here, especially if he can do well in Iowa, which is a really good state for him.
What does it say about the divisions in this country if 2020 looks like Elizabeth Warren, who's pretty far on the left, and then Donald Trump, who is pretty far on the right?
I think that it shows that America is dividing, is that we have sorted ourselves geographically along ideological and demographic lines. We have sorted ourselves residentially, even within the places where we live. And as we have become more homogenous, it is more and more impossible for us to imagine that the other side might ever have a point.
So I think one of the things that's happening in the Democratic world is they look at Donald Trump and they see a weak incumbent, an unpopular president. As you said, given the economy, he should be much stronger, but he's very weak. And a number of Democrats are thinking, why should we do what we must? Let's have some fun. And Elizabeth Warren, for them, represents some fun.
So let's take a chance to make some predictions here. 1 year out, not necessarily a candidate, not necessarily a winner, something from this strange political beast that is the United States. Can you make one prediction that we'll see the next year?
I think you'll see an amazing level of political engagement. 2018 saw the highest voter turnout in a non-presidential year since before the First World War. I think you're going to see turnout in the 60% or even higher range. Both Republicans and Democrats are going to mobilize a lot of people. And the bigger the turnout, obviously, the better the Democrats do. Their coalition is bigger, but harder to mobilize. But when mobilization is high, they do have the numbers behind them. And it could be, there could be long lines at the polls. There will be an effort in Republican-leaning areas to make it more difficult to vote, to discourage Democratic voters who are weakly attached to the political process.
Eric?
President Trump is impeached. He is acquitted by the Senate on a mostly party line vote. Maybe they have one Republican crossing over, somebody like a Mitt Romney. And by November, it has almost no bearing on the election. People actually forget that it actually happened because it feels like so long ago. And that's not to say this process is not important. It is important. But I think that views are so hardened that they're going to be hard to move. And especially, Democrats didn't want to impeach the president because they were worried it might help him. I think getting this out of the way before the Democratic nomination process really begins allows for this to kind of fade in the background.
Last word to you.
Well, I'm mindful of the great physicist Niels Bohr's line that predictions are hard, especially about the future. But I will say that barring a recession, which I think will be a game changer and is entirely possible, that in November 2020, when it's all over and people are looking back, both sides are going to be shocked by how close it was and sort of unable to believe that so many of their countrymen voted for the other person.
Okay. 3 of you, thank you very, very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Ian is back in 2 minutes with stories developing around the world. Also ahead, our moment, a set of Second World War medals donated to Goodwill that finally made it home. That's coming up.
Welcome back to the National Newsroom in Vancouver. Iraq's recent surge of violence doesn't appear to be easing. At least 5 people were killed after security forces reportedly opened fire on protesters. Thousands continue to gather in Baghdad, part of the largest wave of anti-government protests in decades. More than 250 people have died since the demonstrations began in early October. Police today found 41 migrants alive, hiding in a refrigerated truck in northern Greece. Most of them from Afghanistan. They weren't injured, though some asked for medical assistance. The driver was arrested. Police had stopped the vehicle during a routine check on a highway. You'll likely remember last month, 39 Vietnamese nationals were found dead in a similar vehicle near London. And the Washington Nationals continued their World Series celebration today, making a stop at the White House and creating a moment that quickly got a lot of attention online. There's catcher Kurt Suzuki receiving an enthusiastic hug from the president after donning a Make America Great hat at the podium. Most of the team attended today's event, but at least 8 players did decline an invitation. Next on the National, searching for the people behind a wild scene in Toronto. Who held up traffic on a busy airport highway to do donuts? The police investigation right after this.
In the middle of the night, cars were brought to a stop right in the middle of a Toronto highway by something police say was really reckless, even potentially deadly. And as Greg Ross explains, the driver behind it all, still out there.
This cell phone video shows a white sports car doing donuts in the middle of a major Toronto highway.
It's dangerous and reckless, and it's criminal.
Just steps away, a number of people gathered to watch from the side of the highway, leaving their cars to block all of the eastbound lanes.
People are hijacking the highway for their own personal adventure, their own thrills.
Police are now telling us they believe this happened early Sunday morning. That's when calls came in that a part of Highway 409 was blocked by several cars. It happened on the part of the 409 where you see that curve in the highway here just behind me. It doesn't appear anyone was hurt, but Kerry Schmidt says the outcome could have been far worse.
Had traffic been approaching that area and ran into the back of stopped traffic unexpectedly, and people are going to get hurt, people are going to die because of this.
The person behind the wheel is facing the most severe charges, including stunt driving. But the people who got out of their cars to watch could also be facing charges. This is not the first time something like this has happened.
We've seen groups like this hijack and commandeer intersections in the city. There's the feeling of protection in numbers, and because 1, 2, 3, or 4 people are doing it, well, I'll just jump on and be part of the excitement.
In 2017, a mob of motorcyclists blocked off a number of highways in the Toronto area. It was also recorded by some of the participants, and dozens of them were charged. Schmidt says police have already received a number of tips about this weekend's incident, including some from people who say they were there at the time. Police are hopeful they will lead to the identity of the driver and anyone who helped organize this. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
It's reckless and pretty dumb. Okay, next on the National, our moment. It's about a trip to Goodwill, a nationwide social media hunt, and one woman's brand new connection to her family's history. That's right after this. These family memories, including medals from the Second World War, were donated to a Calgary Goodwill store last week, prompting the store to then go searching for the family they belonged to. And the woman who ended up claiming them, while she grew up hearing stories about her grandfather who died liberating Holland in 1945, she wasn't aware these mementos existed. So her discovery of family history is our moment of the day.
That's my grandmother's writing, so I've got to assume that's Mom's.
Oh, is that ever cool? There you go.
It's my mom's graduation. Lost my mom and my grandma several years ago, and this is pretty amazing. We're still even trying to figure out how it happened. Yeah, definitely would not have been an intentional thing. I think there was probably a little bit of some fate involved. I mean, it's if they hadn't been donated, if they hadn't opened the box and seen them, they'd probably sit on a shelf somewhere for another few decades. Grandpa was the love of her life. My grandmother was very good at telling us all about the history of the family and that kind of thing, but I think maybe she was just more concerned about telling us what kind of man he was than that he got medals in the war. So.
And a few things I find impressive about this story, Ian. A, obviously the original recipient of the medals, but also that the Goodwill store managed to find the family and that they even bothered to look. They didn't have to do that, but they did.
And Andrew, another part of the story which is terrific is that as people read more about it, as I was doing today, we learned not just about this man and his family, but also his regiment, Fort Garry Horse, a very famous Canadian Reserve tank regiment from Winnipeg. They were involved in the D-Day invasion, and Sergeant Finch rejoined the regiment in Holland. That is where he was killed, and a good story to mark and to remember a week before Remembrance Day.
Yeah.
That is the National for this Monday, November the 4th. Good night.
Good night.